Welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. My name is Austin Chadwick and co-host is Chris Lucian. And today we're going to be talking about mob programming or mobs interacting with people who, not hardware or firmware type people or software people, but kind of external actions like finance or something like that. And this actually comes up from a request from all of you. So thank you for your feedback and comments. So a conversation started on LinkedIn with me, Steve Wells, and Dragan Stepanovic. And basically, Dragan said, we've had on the show before, we can put that in the show notes because he has some excellent content. He said, if you happen to hear of a case where someone brought a legal or finance person to a mob, please record an episode on it. And he said, I think the important thing we're looking for is having availability in the system so that we have higher responsiveness and faster flow. If someone is not in a mob but is available for answering questions quickly, that's also a huge step. And so, we're going to have an episode about that right now. And I think, Chris, maybe you had some stories you wanted to share. So what's the first one that comes to mind?
Well, I think, first of all, I have talked about like this whole availability thing before, and we've actually seen it in just product owners in general. So, we had people that were available daily, people available weekly, monthly, and so on. And it was really interesting to see the cycle times related to that. And we saw exactly that. It was, daily releases very easy with somebody around all the time and very, very difficult with somebody away. So my first story is this was, we were working on a application, and it was kind of very, data heavy. And so we invited a finance person to come in, very transaction oriented system. And, I think the default for them was to just kind of be like, okay, here's a stack of requirements, go ahead and work on it. And so, we've been mobbing for a while at that point, probably 2 years or so. And it was something along the lines of like, going back and forth with requirements can be okay, but we have lots of questions and we have questions all the time. So come and sit with us. So this finance person ended up sitting with us, and as we would make changes to the system and rerun calculations, they would be able to give us feedback on them, and it really closed the loop. We had another person in that same finance department that we were really dependent on, and they were only available very periodically, and it was just their responsibilities and their role was really difficult. And so we had this really big contrast between these two people. One that was available for giving us frequent feedback all the time, and it was releases like every few hours. And then this person that really wasn't available much at all, and it was like days between releases. And it was just because it's like, can't get this question answered, can't get this thing verified. And another thing was like the batching of the feedback. So the person that was with us all the time, the feedback was very small, just incremental and direct. And the person that wasn't with us very often would give us like, oh, this thing doesn't match up to this thing, that doesn't match up to that thing, which is connected to this thing over here. And all of a sudden you have like this giant tangled mess that you have to unwind to figure out what little thing do you need to change to make it all better. So maybe that's my first story. And Austin, maybe you have a story.
Yeah. And one meta thing about that is I think the whole flow thing is so key. And I think you said it and Dragan said it, where you want the steamroller to keep rolling, right? And anything that, puts a huge boulder in the road to roadblock that is a big deal. And so, I love keeping the flow going. And I have this tendency just to keep pulling people into the mob, especially remotely. You just push their name, push the button on their name, and all of a sudden you invite them. And I just keep doing that until we have the person in the mob that can answer the question, right? And and I've seen the same exact thing. People who are available, wow, we just keep rolling and keep flowing really well. And and so the one story I had too was also finance. I had you telling your story helped me remember more about it. Was that we were starting some work, and this was more reporting end of it. We were going to start some work. So we had a meeting to kind of get a little bit of context where we were saying, okay, we're going to start this work. It'd be great if we could, have these interactions at a certain cadence, or, we're going to be having questions. And so we kind of prepared, kind of set the stage a little bit. And then when we came the time to start working on it, we invited them over. This finance person sat in our mob, and we basically showed how it was working now, and then asked for their feedback on it, and asked clarifying questions on what to make differently. And then we made the changes on the fly with them kind of checking the quote unquote math or the formulas and that kind of stuff. And also the formatting, because that was important as well, so that people can read it, right? Read it well. And it was a really fun session. It was very productive because it was like question, answer, change, question, answer, change, question, answer, change, observation, change, and so we just kind of had that rapid cycling going on. And there were other times before that set of interactions where it was, like you said, the bigger batch before, where the transaction cost was high. And, we would send feedback, we would send changes and then wait a week, and then it comes back, and then we're like, oh, what were we doing again? And so you're kind of out of context. You have to pay all those costs of getting back in the flow. And whenever I get asynchronous feedback that's over text, I almost, it's not like you don't believe it, because you always trust but verify, right? But it's always just like, I always want to follow it up with a conversation to verify, right? Because there's so many misunderstandings that can happen when it's not an on-the-fly conversation or on-the-fly demo of what's going on. And so to turn that situation into that was pretty fun. Yeah. Did you have any other stories, Chris?
Yeah. So this one's pretty cool because if you go back and look at the time lapse from the 2012 time lapse, the very first one we did when we were first talking about mob programming ever, I think, and talking about it at conferences, you'll actually see the product owner come in. And so this was among the first times that we were having product owners come in to the group daily. So this person was kind of in a manufacturing quality control role. And so it's kind of on the other side of the manufacturing process. And that was a really cool experience because it was, a really significant system. And again, it was another part of the business that had, that just didn't look at software as kind of something that needs that flow efficiency, right? Because it's very hard to know that when you're outside. Like empathy for these other groups, it's like they do projects in a completely different way, and that's fine. So a little bit of it is just like saying, hey, you're going to get the best experience you can by showing up here on a regular basis. So in that time lapse, you can kind of watch him pop in and then work with the team, and he's there in the mob, and we're rotating through as we're talking to him about it. Once he's kind of given his feedback and has been satisfied, and we've made small changes to make a little bit of progress, then we came out of that. I think also it kind of built really solid relationships for the people that are in the business, because it builds empathy both ways, right? So like, what does this person have to deal with in their day-to-day work? Why are they asking you to do the things that you're doing? And all that context actually, I think, gets baked into decisions that get made as you go forward. And so that one was just a really solid interaction, and it built relationships. And it's like, we still talk to these people in this kind of department, even though the software that was built, I think, so what's cool about this is like this story too, is that software was built like 8 or 9 years ago. It's still running in production, no bug reports back. Like we haven't even had to like do much to it since then. And it's just knocking out, its responsibility all this time. So, and I think I attribute a lot of that high quality to having the person with the knowledge there with us to give us the flow we needed to hit a really good stride. So, Austin, how about you? Got another one?
Nice. No, and I want to double down on that trust point. I've really seen that when, for both sides, when the team, maybe more often a technically focused team, whenever they interact with someone from the business side, whatever it is, it just generates a lot of positive emotion I've seen, because I think productively doing something together kind of builds a great relationship that seems to last a long time. I've noticed that when I've had those kind of interaction, even years later, I run into someone in the hallway and they're like, "Oh, good to see you," and I'm currently in a mob right now where we work on so many different apps that I think what did you say, Chris? It was like one of the best assets of being this mob is you get to meet so many people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And so, yeah, just, we were working with data science, and I know that's more technical oriented, but, you can just see that on the fly troubleshooting, or you're working with someone who's using the product and you can just on the fly show the screen and be like, okay, does that make sense? And then we make the changes in the background and then show them again. And they're like, okay, that's better. So we had that interaction a couple times with people on the manufacturing recently. And then also I had one experience that was a customer that was also really cool. So it kind of goes to that lean mindset thing where, you want to interact with customers directly, so in the cases we've been talking about were internal. I've also done ones where it's external, where there's someone in the field on the fly, has a question or experiencing confusion, or there's a problem of some kind. And they were in the field and we were in the call together, and they were doing things in the real world to interact with kind of cloud IoT devices. And we were looking at it from the kind of cloud backend perspective. And, the conversation flowed back and forth from technical to domain, but it was just a really fun conversation because you can kind of get the persona of this user, right? And what matters to them and what doesn't matter to them, and how much they're willing to troubleshoot and how much they're not, and that kind of thing. And so that left quite an impression on the team. And so I think that kind of rounds out at least a summary of my experiences. You got any more before we close this one out, Chris?
Yeah, I got one more. So this was kind of, more recent, and it was a really interesting thing. So we had a product owner, and they were available essentially, it was kind of ad hoc, but we were in person. So this was before we went remote, before COVID, all that stuff. It was like, we actually, it's a pretty big campus. And so people are walking back and forth. And so, just kind of to talk about availability, because I know it's still like the maybe not exactly related to the question, but I just like this story because it relates so much to the availability and flow. So all that walking time between buildings. And so, the team would actually look out the window and see this person walking to another building and be like, oh no, we need them to come over here, but they won't be available for hours or days. And so, in fact, there were periods of time where it was like, we got a face-to-face conversation in like, even over the course of a month. And it was really hard to get certain things answered and things demoed and stuff like that. And then we went remote. And all of a sudden, like all the behaviors shifted. And like, this is like one really big benefit, I think, to going remote in general, is that everybody now is not expecting walking time. And so what happens is, I think that people just like go to that call to get that feedback right away, because that's like what they would do anyway, even if they were doing a meeting. And so when you're remote first, you are much less likely to hold on to information until you have a face-to-face conversation, which I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I think the timeliness of the feedback trumps the quality gain of interaction when you're in person. And so I think just with that kind of remote first mentality, we had just these huge gains in flow, because people that were generally not available became much more available more frequently.
Yeah, and it's there was one case in particular where it was spanning several time zones and regions and organizations to get everyone needed into the room to solve a problem. And to physically have a meeting would have been huge amount of time, but just to bring them in that instant was it's it's really powerful.
And it's the default now, right? And so
yeah.
like that's I think that it's just people's expectations and also just those micro behaviors. Like you don't actually know how much you're losing by having everybody walk back and forth, because there's such a high precedent for value on face-to-face communication over remote. So
yep. Awesome. Well, I think that's good to wrap it up. We would love to hear your stories. Please add comments on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. Have you had any cases of mob programming, ensemble programming with finance or other departments similar to that, or just areas where you saw flow really kick into high gear and what led to that? So we'd love to have your feedback. Please like and subscribe. Please share this episode with anybody who you think this might help and whatever they're going through at the moment. And mob well, and have a good one, everybody. Bye.
bye, everyone.